Oh, how I miss the taste of a full English breakfast followed by blasting out Mendelssohn's Prelude in C minor from the college chapel. Oxford was the only university I ever applied to because it's the only university I ever wanted to go to. But the task of actually getting in there was much trickier than I would ever have imagined. In 2 years of producing YouTube videos, I can say for certain that my Oxford education was the key inspiration for everything which I film and which I talk about, and it taught me some really vital skills which I don't think I'll ever forget. And when I'm 100 years old, I'll still be talking about Oxford University. So it's about time I told you how I got into Oxford and what happened in the terrifying audition. But first of all, it's worth pointing out that my musical background is nothing like that of all the other organ scholars. Young organists almost always start their musical career at the piano, and then they go on to the church organ, almost always through being a chorister at a parish church or a cathedral. They never come at the organ the way I did, which was from progressive rock music. I loved Pink Floyd, I loved Emerson, Lake and Palmer from the age of 14, but at that age I had no musical training. I just loved that kind of music. So I started to teach myself the keyboard. I didn't have lessons, not like everybody else who started at the age of 6. I taught myself. That means I bought a book and I sat carefully bashing out the notes until I got better and better, and I've still got the keyboard which I used. Here it is. This is the very same keyboard which I purchased from Toys R Us when I was 14 years old, and which really helped me to begin my obsession with music. There was no chorister training, there were no rigorous piano lessons. It was all done by myself. Once I'd mastered 2 fingers on this keyboard, I bought a synthesizer so I could really try my best to replicate the sound which Keith Emerson made in pictures at an exhibition with the band Emerson, Lake and Palmer, of course. So that's where music began for me. So how do you progress, literally, from progressive rock to classical? The opposite way round, of course, to ELP. Well, when you start GCSE music as a self-taught synthesizer player, you feel slightly out of your depth. There are other people who've had proper musical training. So it's time to start some lessons. And if you're incredibly shy, not only do you want an instrument where the player is invisible, but also you want to make a point. You want to do something different to everybody else, make more noise than them. So you choose the pipe organ. And of course that fitted in with my love of progressive rock music, which used the Hammond organ. If you're not familiar with progressive rock music, well, it sounds something like this. That's Bach's Toccata in D minor, in my own progressive rock arrangement, the kind of thing I would have played as a self-taught keyboard player. But that developed, of course, backwards, back to its original form by J.S. Bach. Bach's Toccata in D minor, which I'd learnt by the time I was about 16 years old. So you can tell that thus far my organ playing journey could be summarised with the phrase regressive rock. Speaking of rock, there is a quote in a Kinks song which says, "Girl, you've really got me now. You've got me so I don't know what I'm doing." I took that to heart. Unlike the other boys at my school, I avoided any teenage romances and focused entirely on trying to get to the best university in the world. Oxford is made up of 43 different colleges. There is no campus. Each college is self-contained and they make up the university as a whole. Each of these colleges has its own dining hall, its own accommodation, its own tutor rooms, and usually its own chapel. As an organist, it would be silly not to apply for an organ scholarship at Oxford. Organ scholars do read for an undergraduate degree. They aren't just organ scholars. Normally they read music, but they can also read other subjects, in addition to playing the organ in the chapel. But there is a certain advantage to applying as an organ scholar, as well as applying to read music, because the university needs people to play the organs in its chapels, so there's a certain prestige involved when you apply as an organ scholar. However, that does not make it easier to get into Oxford. It's not a back door. If anything, it makes it much more difficult because you have to go through 2 different sets of examinations effectively. You'll have the normal interviews to read music, but as well as that, you will have auditions and perhaps further interviews to gain an organ scholarship at your chosen college. These 2 sets of interviews took place together over about 3 days, during which I would live in the Oxford College of my choice, which was St. Peter's College. I was given a timetable when I arrived at Oxford, which contained my faculty interviews, college interviews, but also the timetable for my organ scholar auditions. As far as the music degree is concerned, there is way too much there to discuss in one video, I'm afraid. However, if you're interested, perhaps I could put another video together. It's an almost endless subject. So today I'm just focusing on the organ scholar audition. And to do that, I went to a church which is quite familiar to me earlier this week, so that we could go through exactly what's involved. Welcome back to a church which is very close to my heart. And funnily enough, hearts are the symbol of this village because it's called Lover. But I'm here because this church is remarkably similar to some of the Oxford chapels I remember. It's Victorian with a single cell design. It's bright and cool and has a great acoustic. But the most important feature today is the pipe organ, built by William Sweetland of Bath. I've chosen this instrument to revisit some of the parts of my Oxford audition, since it has a very similar specification to many of the instruments at Oxford. 2 manuals, pedals, and a fairly limited range of stops. So it's here that I can show you some of the challenges a prospective organ scholar faces. I'm going to read you exactly what Oxford University says takes place in an organ scholar audition. They say this: the audition lasts approximately 15 to 20 minutes. In it you will play a prepared piece of your own choosing, lasting between 5 and 7 minutes, and you'll attempt 4 tests: sight reading, score reading, transposition, and harmonisation. Well, I can certainly remember doing all of that. I was auditioned at a college called Lincoln College, where there was a 2-manual pipe organ with a straight pedalboard. So what are these different features? First of all, a prepared piece of your own choosing. Oh, that could be anything, couldn't it? No, it couldn't, actually. Bach? Yes. Buxtehude? Yes. Boelman? No. Parry? No. Vierne? No. Vidor? No. You should really play a Baroque composer. You should really play Bach. There's a piece of free advice for anybody applying to Oxford as an organ scholar. Just play Bach. Why do you play Bach? Because he was a master composer. He wrote loads of organ pieces which work on any kind of organ. So if you sit down terrified at this organ for the audition, you can guarantee it'll be able to play Bach. It's pretty useless if it can't. But it won't be able to play Vidor's Toccata. It won't be able to play Boelman very well. Just to give you a flavour of Boelman on a much larger instrument, listen to this. Boelman's Toccata, completely inappropriate for an Oxford audition, in my opinion. Let me play you something much more appropriate. That's Bach's Fantasia in G minor. It's about 6 minutes long. It shows off everything you need to show off as an organist. And nobody listening needs a score to run through looking for wrong notes. They can tell if you can play it or not, if it's by Bach. If you play a wrong note in Bach, it's really obvious. But it's more than that. It's about the style. If you can't play Bach stylishly with the right articulation, you don't deserve to be an organ scholar at Oxford, because the foundation of organ playing is Bach. It's very mathematical. It shows that you can work hard, practice with discipline, and learn a piece of music properly if you can play Bach. There's nowhere to hide. Having said that, that piece I just showed you a clip from, the Fantasia in G minor, is perfect for an Oxford audition. But that opening, it contains lots of notes. This was the piece I was planning to play for my Oxford audition, but I changed my mind. If you're nervous and you sit down and your opening starts like this, there are so many notes, there's a good chance you're going to get something wrong. And once you get something wrong, the rest of that audition will probably go downhill. So how about another piece of Bach? Something which starts very simply, yet is a very academic piece of music which still fulfills the brief you've been given. This is the piece I played for my audition. Die sind die heiligen Zehn Gebote, which means these are the holy 10 commandments, by J.S. Bach. You can see why I would choose to play that particular piece. It starts very simply, so when you're very nervous, you can still make sure you get everything right. Just one pedal note, some lovely flute sounds. The piece develops to become much more complicated, and you'll find out at the end of this video because we'll hear it in full. But it always remains serene, and it's quite clever because Bach introduces complexity with a veneer of pastoral simplicity, doesn't he, in that piece? It's so calm and gentle, and it's based on the chorale, these are the holy 10 commandments, which itself is quite still at the beginning. Did you see all of those repeated G notes when the tune comes in the left hand? Bach actually plays the hymn tune in canon. Now, canon is an ancient form of music. That word is the Latinized form of the Greek, which means law. So you can see how clever it is that Bach introduces canon or law in a piece of music based on a hymn. These are the holy 10 commandments. Very clever indeed, Bach, and the perfect piece for my Oxford audition. It's about 7 minutes long, so I was just about okay with that one. I'd like to now turn to two of the other audition components, the tests. So we had sight reading, harmonisation, score reading and transposition. For now, I'd just like to focus on sight reading and transposition. What does sight reading mean? Some of you will know that already. Well, it means playing a piece of music that you've never seen before. Sometimes, as an organist, you'll just have to sit down and play a score somebody's just given you 10 seconds ago. It's a vital skill, and it shows how well you can read music if you can play a piece at sight. So to put that to the test, I had to choose a random piece of music, of course. I couldn't choose something I already knew. So I searched on the internet and found a passage by a composer called Johannes Rink. And I treated that as my mock sight reading test. And you would be expected in an Oxford audition to just sit down and play that, and you would be judged on how well you could play it. So here goes. Any thoughts? Did I play it very well? The score was there, so if you read music, you could mark me out of 10 and be as brutal as you like. I'd never played that piece of music before, so as you could tell, it was slightly less polished than my usual YouTube performances. But that's sight reading for you. Perhaps a piece of advice I would give is to introduce lots of rubato, which means expressive slowing down, just to help give you a bit more time to think about what's coming next. Also remember the key signature and prepare your feet in advance. That piece started with 2 Gs. So you've got to get the feet in the right place before you start playing. So there is sight reading. Now we turn to the fun and terrifying part, transposition. What does transposition mean? It means playing a hymn tune in a different key to the one it's written in. Say you're playing to an elderly congregation who can't reach the high notes. You need to be able to play the hymn in a lower key to help them out. But you won't always have the score in that lower key. So you'll have to look at the hymn, which is say in G major, but play it a tone lower in F major. So what you're playing is not the same as what's written on the music. It's a useful skill for organists. Again, I had to find a hymn which I didn't know already because I wanted to make this a fair mock-up of an Oxford audition. So I had to turn to an American hymn tune by George Frederick Root, who I must confess I've never heard of. He was a romantic American composer, and he was apparently named after George Frederick Handel. But this is one of the hymn tunes which he wrote, which if you're from the States, perhaps you're quite familiar with. Let me play it to you in its original key. This is G major. And now I will attempt to play it in a lower key at sight, just like an Oxford audition. And to prove that I'm not cheating, you can see the music on the music desk. The Shining Shore by George F. Root. Written in G major, transposed down to F major, and there was one noticeable hesitation, I thought, in that performance. I would say transposition is a bit like reading something in English on a page, but actually speaking it in French at sight. It's mind-boggling. Anyway, the only 2 tests I haven't discussed today are score reading and harmonisation of a melody. If you're interested to hear about score reading and harmonisation, just let me know because I will gladly make another video on the subject, continuing on from this one. If you've enjoyed this, please remember to subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, but it means that if I make a sequel about Oxford University, perhaps where I actually go there, then you'll be the first to see it. I'd quite like to do that. I'd love to go to Oxford, maybe go to my old college, St. Peter's, where I read music and played in the chapel on a Henry Willis organ. I could possibly arrange to actually go and show you that organ. But please do subscribe, because that's the only way you'll find out about it. Lots of people say to me, do you have a list of all your programs in order? Well, it doesn't really work like that on YouTube. YouTube is a strange kind of program where things operate on a pick and choose basis, and lots of people miss my videos if they're not subscribed. So please do click the subscribe button. If you've learnt something today, I would be so pleased. And of course, part of my job here on YouTube is to inspire the next generation of organists. If you're pleased that I'm doing that and you enjoy these videos, you can leave me a donation if you'd like to. I'd be so grateful for that. If you look underneath this video, there's a link. If you click on that, it takes you to my PayPal donations page, where you can leave a small contribution if you'd like to, and if you're enjoying these films. I spend all week thinking about these videos, getting them ready for Sunday, and practicing and editing to put them all together, which is an arduous task. It takes a long time. So your support would be very gratefully received. It's really the key way that I can continue to do this. So thank you so much for your help. I'm going to end with a piece of music which changed my life. But first, with a moral lesson for you, a secret. This is an apple. Apples were very important in my interviews. As well as undergoing auditions, sometimes the professors eat lunch with you. That's a good way of them getting to know you outside of the auditions process. During one of these particular meals, there were apples offered on trays, different kinds of fruit, and I was offered an apple, and I confidently, just to show I wasn't nervous, bit a great chunk out of this apple. And it was at that point, to my horror, I looked and saw that everybody else was cutting theirs up with a knife. Cheerio.